I'm Scott Allen Miller, and this is Sam IT. And in today's episode, I want to do a kind of case study. We're going to talk about when to consider hosted or cloud applications or on-premises applications for clinical management for veterinarians. Now, before you click away because you're not a vet or you're not looking at this kind of detail for your clinic, this is very general information. That's why I say this is a case study. This kind of discussion is going to apply broadly to a lot of different kinds of businesses, but your answer may come up different, but the things that we discuss are going to be widely applicable. But if you are a vet, you definitely want to be watching this because I'm going to cover some things that are incredibly applicable to you. Okay, so veterinary clinics. Before we get started, we're going to make some assumptions. Veterinary clinics have doctors, veterinarians, who work in them and treat animals. If you are a special kind of clinic that does not do that, this may not apply to you. That doesn't mean you shouldn't watch. Please watch. But it does mean that we may make some assumptions that are not correct. For example, if you are a mobile clinic and you work from a van, and this is pretty common, I know lots of vets who do this, this kind of information will be in reverse. So we'll try to mention that at some point so that we account for that. But if you're a very special case, yes, this may be different information. So when I say always, I'm referring to always where the assumptions are true, which is that you are a normal clinic that is on a specific location treating animals in person or in animal, as the case may be. Okay, so that given information, there are two general categories of PIMs or practice management systems, practice information management systems that we can buy. On one side, there is the traditional on-premises category. That is your Avamarks, your Impromeds, your Cornerstones. Pretty much everybody in the veterinary industry is going to know these products. If you don't know them, go look them up. But they are on-premises. They all deploy on a server. You run it inside your shop. You connect everything to it. You have to supply your own infrastructure. On the other side, we have the modern web-based applications that run in the cloud, as they will call it. That is not a meaningful term in this case. We'll talk about that in just a second. But what they are is hosted. That is, someone else hosts them for you somewhere else. And that's what they mean when they say cloud. It's inaccurate, but that's what they mean. And those include EasyVet, eVet Practice, Neo, and many, many others. That's pretty much everything being made today. Of these are pretty much all legacy applications. They were made decades ago, and there are some different degree of current ongoing support and updating. In some cases abandoned, in some cases currently developed, but they're very old code bases and they're carrying on an old legacy. On this side, none of these are that old. They're all relatively new. And basically that is the divide. You have old on-premises and new hosted, or cloud as they call it. Before we get into too much, I want to say a little bit about cloud versus hosted. In IT and in all technical endeavors, cloud is an extremely specific technical term that means something very important and does not apply ever to you as a clinic. Doesn't matter what people pretend it means, it doesn't mean something meaningful to you. I can make Avamark run on a cloud, on premises, inside your system, on your servers. I can get any of these products with no cloud at all. There is no association between true cloud and what we call cloud to consumers. What cloud means in a marketing and sales terminology is simply hosted. It means off premises. It means some company, the ones generally who make the software, are hosting it for you and you are simply accessing it. That's a useful differentiation, on premises versus off premises. But of course, if you're running Impromed, it runs on premises, right? Well, it does, but we can really trivially take it off premises. You can find an Impromed hosting company. That's not a hard thing to find. It's an awkward thing to find. It's not going to work very well because it's not designed to work that way. Part of their legacy design is they don't have any real accommodations for being used off-site. That doesn't mean that a qualified veterinary technical company won't be able to do that for you. Of course they can. And we can talk in another episode about architectures and strategies and patterns that can be used to do that effectively, because all products that run on premises can be used off premises, and all products that work off premises could be used on premises if their vendors allowed you to. So that portion is weird, but it's important to understand that if our goal is only to be off premises, that does not push us to cloud products. And if we want all the technology that's in these cloud products, we don't need cloud to do that. So these two camps are purely host it yourself, presumably on premises, but not necessarily, or someone else hosts it for you, definitely off premises. There's no one who hosts for you on premises. That's completely untrue. Of course there is, but they're not in one of the major camps. They're not someone that you know, most likely. So when you're a clinic and you're looking at these two things, this is actually really simple. There's one giant factor going on premises, host yourself, off premises, not hosted. That hosted for you, I mean. So that's the big deciding factor between these products. And it's so large that it should be a deciding factor from the very get-go. In fact, you should be able to determine which of these camps you will even talk to from the starting gate. And it's this simple. Are you a clinic? You can rule these out. There, you don't have to watch the rest of this video. As long as you follow that advice, you'll be in better shape, because only the ones in this camp, only those that you can run yourself on premises or that someone will run for you on premises, should even cross your desk as the remotest possibility. Now we'll go into why, but that's the important takeaway. There is no situation where you have a clinic and should be entertaining these products. Okay, so let's look at the factors that cause this decision to get made. When you're looking at these two types of factors, of course, you say things like, but I don't want to manage my software. That's fine. Get someone to manage your on-premises stuff for you. That's okay. That's not a significant problem. It's starting to rain as I do this video. Perfect timing. It was pure light when I came out. The on-premises, most importantly, do not require an internet connection in order for you to work. And when you do lose your internet, they keep working just fine because everything inside your clinic is connected directly to the servers or directly through a switch. You have an internal local area network to which everything is plugged in. You don't need internet. You don't need your router. There's a bunch of things that break pretty often or lose service that you do not rely on when you're dealing with an on-premises self-hosted system. So these protect you when it matters, because if you were to lose things and lose connectivity, sure, it sucks when you lose the internet, and there may be tools that you use that you won't be able to access. But what's most important is your PIMs is going to be available, and when you've got that dog on the operating table, or you're looking at that cat's allergy situation and medical history, you're still going to be able to access it at the time you need it, when doing surgery, when treating the animal. You're going to save lives because you're going to keep access to your data when you need it. And we can talk about backup and disaster recovery afterwards. Trust me, that still favors this solution, 100%, no exceptions. On this side, you have the same possibilities. You have the same possibility of the server failing, so they could go down because of hardware failure, just like these can. There is no magic cloud somewhere that keeps that from happening. That's completely false. That is just a marketing idea that is spread a lot, and they hope that people will just repeat it themselves. No one actually tries to prove it because it's not a thing. So there's no specific reliability created by the fact that these are hosted. If the hosting company is really good, it could be better. If they're really bad, it could be worse. But in the same thing with the on-premises, if you're doing a good job, your reliability could be basically guaranteed. And if you're doing a terrible job, it could be terrible. It's the quality of the job that you do in either case that determines how good it is. The only difference is on this side, you control it, and on this side, you don't. You just hope that you chose well, and you can't really evaluate. There's no way for you to evaluate. That's not possible given the way that they work. It's just how it is. So on this side, if anything goes wrong here, the failures should be about equal as far as hardware failure. But on this side, you're also impacted by things like network failure and power along the way. So if a huge network outage happens, your ISP goes down, or there's a routing issue, as has happened over the last 3 years in the United States, we have had entire halves of the country lose their internet because the routing tables broadly have gone down. No one's ISP failed. The connections between the ISPs failed. So no individual person had an outage, yet everyone was offline for an entire day. Those are important things. On this side, any of those things happen, you have problems getting the information you need to treat the animals on your operating table. You're going to have animals die at some point, and it's going to be for reasons of business negligence. That is not an accident at that point that they died, because this is knowledge that any IT person should have had beforehand. This is not complicated stuff. There is no situation where you have an operating room in a specific location where anybody should be allowing these to come up as options. They are too risky to the animals' lives and well-beings and to your business beyond just the medical care, right? These carry a risk that is simply unacceptable and could be used in court if those decisions were made. there is a risk that you could be sued for those decisions, and it would be very difficult to defend, well, we thought they would take care of us and we just didn't evaluate the safety. That's not something that's going to hold up in court. These don't carry an advantage to outweigh the safety benefits of an on-premises system. Now, can an on-premises system fail? Of course it can, but so can this. This has many fewer things to fail and is designed to accommodate your needs, and it is the industry standard. This is the baseline for a clinic. There is no real excuse to be looking at something else unless you have a completely different need, such as you're a mobile clinic. If you're a mobile clinic, you don't have an on-premises to put a server in. Having a hosted solution or an off-premises that you host yourself are both completely viable solutions, and that needs to be evaluated in a completely different way. But for a clinic, it should not have to be said, these are the only category of software items that can be used if they're critical to your patient care. If they're not critical to patient care, if they're just for billing, if they're just for backups or whatever, then that's fine. You can do anything you want, right? But when it comes to actual patient care, when it comes to your business going down, going offline, animals on a table, not having the information that you need to be able to perform a surgery safely, this is the only way you can go with any semblance of having tried to make the correct decision. It doesn't matter what software is in these categories. This one differentiator is so large that you should start your decision process by going, oh, they're cloud only, they're hosted only, off the table. Do not let them in the door, because this tells us more than just how it's hosted, right? These products, if some salesperson, if some IT person, if somebody comes to you and says, you should be looking at these cloud solutions for your clinic, and of course, there'll be excuses. Well, you can spend tons of money and get multiple ISPs and all kinds of things to mitigate the size of disaster of decision that you're making. But they're very expensive. They will negate any business value, and they don't provide very much protection in the real world. So they're mostly a red herring, but they will cost you a lot of money. Anybody who comes to you and suggests these things, if it's a salesperson, it means that salesperson is being predatory. They are not in any way attempting to deliver a solution that meets reasonable clinical needs. They are simply trying to make a quick buck and using false marketing words like cloud that mean nothing in the context that they're using them to try to convince you that hosted, which is an old concept, been around since the 1950s, is something new and cool and you should switch to it, even though for decades we've known that that was not a thing to do, right? They just slapped a new word on it and made it seem like, lipstick on a pig. It was always a bad solution. There's a reason we didn't do it in the 80s and 90s for vet clinics, and why we went with this. Now, calling it a new thing does not change the fundamental problem that it's a bad idea. So anyone who's trying to sell it to you, kick them out, because they are being dangerous. They are trying to put you at risk to make a quick dollar for themselves. That's not good. But then let's look at those vendors. Vendors who are making those products pretending that they're for clinics are also a problem, because it means one of two things, neither one of which is good, and you can decide which you find more offensive or dangerous. But one is that they are completely incompetent and know nothing about how vets work, and they simply made software for a completely different industry, such as let's say an insurance firm who just needs to file some numbers online. For them, that hosted solution is perfect. On premises would be a complete waste of effort. Why? If you go down, no one's in danger. You just get your insurance quote a few hours later, maybe a few days later. Who cares? Not a big deal, right? Even if it does cost you some money, it's just money. Nothing's going to die because you made a bad decision or because that decision was financial instead of safety, right? It's a completely different decision. For vets, these things are reckless, really reckless. So if someone is building software in that way, thinking that you're going to use hosted software and they aren't aware that you're a clinic and you need access when someone's on a table, that means that software does not accommodate you in any way. It means the entire company who made that software didn't think about what a vet clinic was like ever. That's a really big deal. No one has ever considered an actual vet using the software ever. That's a really scary position to be in, that you're going to be running something that has zero accommodations for vets. That's probably the better of the two cases. The other case is that these are actually qualified people who do have a clue, and they knowingly have created software that will put your patients at risk and are trying to sell it to you regardless of knowing that fact. That's even worse, I would think. That means they are aware of where the skeletons are in the closet, and they're willing to cover them up because it's about the money. So in either case, you're dealing with either incompetence or a lack of ethics those aren't good things to invite a vendor in under those scenarios, right? I do not want those people. Once I know someone's that incompetent, they gotta go. If I know someone's that evil, they gotta go. Doesn't matter which it is in either case. Get them out of the door and get out any salesperson who's trying to make money by convincing you that that's okay. That's dangerous. Now, on the other side of the table, yes, there can be bad products. Yes, they can be implemented poorly. Yes, there can be vendors who drive you crazy on that side. But at least they're starting from a point of making a product you can consider. I'm not saying any of the products I mentioned are particularly good. It's a weak industry, and it would be great if that's stepped up and started demanding that there be a higher standard to the products that are available in the market. That would make a big difference. But what's happened is some vets have done that, but instead of delivering an improved product, vendors have turned to this quick money grab, going for the marketing term of cloud and trying to pull the wool over everyone's eyes and make some money before people realize that the clinics are left holding the negligence bag, because it is never the vendor's fault. They tell you it is hosted up front. So any vet who selects a hosted product and then has an outage and then has an animal die because of that is unfortunately on the hook, because it is always the customer's requirement to have the IT advisory that does those things. If you opt out from having IT advise you on what's safe and good to do, it's your option to do so. It doesn't change your responsibility for knowing those things. If you want to take the time and be aware of them, for example, by watching this video, perfect. There are paths for free to find out what you need, and those options exist. Now, I do want to say, because vendors are going to hop in and mention, I do work for both a company that provides advisements to veterinarians, and I work for a company that makes products on both sides of this discussion. What's important is I work for companies on both sides. I do not work for someone that only makes cloud. I don't work for someone who only makes on premises. I work for a product, and I'm not going to mention who it is, that makes both. And it's about selecting. If we have customers who select this, we advise them, this is reckless. Why are you doing it? Sure, it's an option, and I'll explain in a minute why it's an important option, but it is not a good idea under normal circumstances. And we constantly say that. We made our product to work this way because that's so important. We would never recommend anything but this. So, and all of the vendors on both sides have that option. They opt not to provide it in that way for whatever monetary reason, possibly because it's just hard to figure out how to do it. But they all have that option and are deciding not to, whether to go both ways. Okay, so I want to talk about the backup thing, because this is going to be a quick discussion that everyone always has. Well, okay, so you can run it on premises, but what happens when your server dies? Now you're really down and all those animals are at risk. You got to go cloud and protect against that. This is totally bogus. Here's why. 3 reasons. First, the chances that something's going to fail is roughly equal. So there's not you ran it on premises, now it's more likely to fail. This could go down. Their hosted environments could go down for weeks at a time. You have no control. You have no access to your data. If that happens, too bad. Now you're really in tough shape. If it's your server that dies, at least you have control of the scenario and you can decide how you're going to mitigate that. That's the first thing. Second thing, some products allow you to migrate from on-premises to cloud and vice versa automatically. So if you're in that category, you can do whatever makes sense at the time. So you run on-premises until something fails, you move to cloud until you get that fixed, and then you move it back. The best of both worlds. You get everything. More commonly, let's use the old legacy examples, Avamark, Impromed, Cornerstone. You have lots of options. Should your environment crash, your server catches on fire and burns up, not very good scenario. You're going to be in tough shape. What are your options? Of course, you can get another server and restore to that. It's probably going to take time. You can't go down to Server Mart on the corner and grab that in the middle of the night. That's not going to happen unless you live in like a Dallas or New York City. Then you actually can do that. But generally, that's not on the table at all. So yeah, you could order a server. Let's assume it's going to take a week to get to you. You can't be down for a week. That's not okay. All right, so you can grab any PC and you actually can run all of those different softwares, and any ones I didn't mention will all run not on server hardware. Is that ideal? No, we don't recommend that. But in the case of an emergency, of course it's okay. Get back up and running, right? Just keep taking backups. And you already had a backup, right? We're assuming in all cases you're taking backups. You restored from a backup. You know your backup's good. You've got a PC running. Keep taking new backups as you go, just like you would. Yes, you might run slower. Yes, you're running a more risky for a few days, but just until your new server arrives, that's okay. Let's say you can't get a PC, or you don't like that scenario, or you just need more functionality because the entire building burned down. Okay, so let's just pretend it's Avmark, Impromed, or Cornerstone. We take our backup, and instead of restoring it into your clinic, we restore it into the cloud. Yes, you can go cloud-based, actual cloud and hosted, both. They do overlap at times, quite a few times, which is why the confusion exists. We can move that to a cloud, an actual cloud, make it hosted temporarily, and there are multiple ways to make that work. Some ways are really painful, some ways are more expensive, some ways are easy, some ways are hard, but there's ways to make it work, and pretty quickly. You can restore that way if you have no environment that you have to go into, or if you have no clinic, right? So if you have just no PC you can install it on, not a problem, there's a solution. You have no clinic in which to put it, no problem, there's a solution. In all these cases, you can stay up and running. You have more options with the on-premises that you control to protect yourself and maintain availability of that data than you do with a hosted solution where you don't know if that vendor is going to keep you up and running. Of course, they could do an amazing job, but anything they can do, you can do too. They don't have magic. A really good vendor who knows their own software, they're going to have advantages. But again, if your internet connection goes down, those advantages don't matter, right? And internet can go down for an entire city. It's not very common, but it can, and it has in the last couple of years. So that's something you have to think about. Just because that data remains available doesn't mean you're going to be able to get it on your cell phone. That may go down too. Doesn't mean you can send someone home to work. That could go down too. In many cases, that will protect you. You send someone home, they get on the phone and they're reading the charts to you. Okay, there are mitigations that you can do with that, but those are all mitigations you can do with this too. In all cases, this wins out in this kind of scenario where you have these clinics. It's a special case scenario where you have clinics of this nature. Most businesses do not. Most offices don't have this set of needs, and they can easily consider hosted stuff for almost everything that they do, or even everything that they do. And I don't want to be down on hosted, because hosting is great, and that is the thing that makes sense for the majority of workloads, even for a vet, just not the things that are necessary to run the clinic. You want to do hosted for your email? That's going to be a no-duh situation. Of course you're going to do hosted for your email. Same thing with phones. Under no conditions should you have a clinic with your phones on premises. This may seem counterintuitive because of all the things we just said. I could do another video that explains why that gets the opposite decision in the same clinic. This decision is by workload. Your PIMs, your clinical information system, needs to be on premises if you have a clinic. And no matter whether you have a clinic or not, your phones, your email, your website, those things need to be off premises or hosted. You could go cloud. However, it could be actual cloud. It could be just the hosted word cloud. Doesn't matter. Those need to be somewhere else. They are a commodity product and not something you should be running on premises. More importantly, your clinical information system's purpose is not to communicate with your customers. It is to give you data about your patients. All of these other systems that we're adamant about keeping hosted, their principal role within your organization is to communicate with your customers. They could be used for some internal communications, and you take a risk with that, but their principal role is external communication. So you need those to stay up and running to the outside world, even when they lose connection to you, just like your clinical information system needs to stay connected to you, even when you lose connection to the outside world. It's a really critical decision path. We're using the same logic and coming to two different answers because the factors are different. But the logic is consistent, and that's important. These are critical business decisions to not just protecting your bottom line, but to protecting your patients. I really hope that this was informative. Please ask lots of questions below. I'm happy to discuss this at length. I will do more details about these kinds of things in other videos. I think these case studies are really valuable. I'm not trying to promote or knock on any specific product within the field, except honestly, anybody who's making hosted products for veterinary and trying to sell them to clinics, I'm flat out saying they are recklessly dangerous for whatever reason, whatever mindset is behind them. They are looking to take unbelievable advantage and put your patients at risk to make money. Run away. I'm saying it, right? But by and large, there's lots of products in the field. There are lots of vendors in the field. And in some cases, you have vendors who have both products, right? Choose the products that make sense. Or if you have a vendor and you don't feel that they have a product that's any good, move to another vendor, right? There are vendors out there who will make sure you get what you need for your clinic, right? You are not trapped with technology. You're not trapped with products. It feels that way. And everyone's using the same things typically, so it makes it even more feel that way, but you do have options. Thanks for joining me. And if you do want to support this channel, I do have a book, Linux Administration Best Practices, which is not so much about Linux, but so much more about systems administration best practices. And a lot of it is simply business best practices. It's really good for anyone, whether you're just managing some servers or looking to see how we think about things in IT. It's really great, just general purpose, and it's not super technical. So it's pretty good for almost anyone who's on this channel. And of course, it helps support me. So thank you very much. Comments below, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.